I come from a multidisciplinary background. That's why I take geologists and engineers and people like that with me to see these in person.
Yeah.
And none of them have been able to, none of them believes for a second that this was done using dynastic Egyptian technology. It had to be much, much older and much more advanced. The evidence that we look at is staring you in the face and telling you, this was not done by the culture that Egyptologists state had to have done it, because there was no sophisticated society, according to them, prior to that time.
Welcome. This is Mind the Shift, and I am Anders Bolling. Where do we come from? Independent researchers are putting together a puzzle that is beginning to reveal a vastly different history than the one we're told in school, especially when it comes to how far back in time civilization actually goes. That our future is unwritten is obvious, but the fact is that also our past is, to a large extent, unwritten or miswritten, which is actually a bit shocking when you think about it. One of these independent researchers is Brien Foerster. Welcome to the podcast, Brien.
Thank you, Anders. It's a pleasure.
Okay, so let's see if I get your bio right here. I'm just briefly gonna say it here. I think you were born in the United States, but you grew up in Western Canada, where you developed a fascination for native art and became a sculptor. That's correct, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and then your interest in native culture brought you first to Hawaii and then to Peru, where you live now. And you've done many things in your life, of course, and not all have to do with what you're famous or known for now. But is it fair to say that a golden thread, so to speak, has been a search for the source of human culture and civilization?
Yeah, I think that's correct and succinct. I've simply followed my passions through life, and it's led me to travel the world and live in different places. And visiting Peru several times finally drew me to buy a one-way ticket and move here. So I've been here for about 13 years now.
Yeah, and you've been to how many? 90 countries or something like that?
I think about 100 now.
100, okay. How many are there? 200 or something? Huh?
Something like that.
So you're getting there. Okay. And you have also written many books, of course. I think a little bit over 20 books now. About
37.
How many?
37.
Oh, 37. Oh, I've only read one.
That's better than none.
Better than none. This is
Great,
called Aftershock, the Ancient Cataclysm That Erased Human History. And we're going to delve into that. So 37 books about megalithic sites and hidden history of different sorts. And you organize tours to megalithic sites. I think you visit Egypt at least once a year.
Yeah, once a year. And then we had 3 major tours of Peru and Bolivia. And previously we've been to Lebanon and Turkey and other locations that have fascinating megalithic locations.
Okay, so also Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, I assume.
Yeah, among other locations.
Okay. And you're also an avid YouTuber, as many know, and where you publish videos from said sites. And I understand you also cooperate with other, independent researchers such as Graham Hancock, Robert Schoch, and also perhaps Nassim Haramein. Is that right?
Yeah, and Andrew Collins, who I noticed you've had on your show.
Exactly.
And,
yes, I had Andrew on the show.
And Michael Tellinger and quite a few, Christopher Dunn, quite a few others.
Yeah, I had Tellinger on the show as well. So yeah, this is amazing, and I think you're doing a great job. It's really important.
Thank you.
I just noticed yesterday I was listening to a Gaia show with Nassim Haramein, and he was talking about the DNA analysis of these elongated skulls, which made me realize that so they probably cooperate, Brien and Nassim there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So when I've tried now to unwrap your research, which is big, I have found three main points just for the audience here to understand what you're doing, and you can correct me if I'm missing something here. But point number one being that there is evidence of human civilization much older than what we've been told. Number two, there is evidence that these civilizations perished in an enormous cataclysm. And point three being that there is evidence that beings that were not Homo sapiens and that may have been survivors or may not have been survivors, but still from the cataclysm, coexisted with humans as late as a couple of thousand years ago. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, excellent. So let's begin here with the evidence of advanced civilizations that perished. I understand that Peru and Egypt are the two core countries that you study here. Would you say so?
Yeah, I would say I've been to Egypt 9 times, and of course I live in Peru, so I've been to all of the major and even most of the minor archaeological sites in Peru and also Bolivia, because the two, Peru and Bolivia, are interlinked because during the time of the Inca, they were the same civilization, the same country, more or less.
Yeah. So what is it? I mean, you study these megalithic structures made basically built out of enormous stone blocks, and they are in several locations around the world. Peru and Bolivia, as you say, and Egypt have some of the most spectacular ones, and the most famous ones being the pyramids, of course, in Giza in Egypt. So what is it, to just briefly understand what we're looking at here? What is it that in these megalithic structures that tell us that they can't have been erected when mainstream archaeologists and scientists say they have?
Well, the commonality between dynastic Egypt and Peru is that during the time of the Inca, is that both had at best bronze tools, and bronze is not useful if you're trying to cut hard stones such as granite and basalt. So that by itself tells you that the Inca and the dynastic people were not capable of constructing these ancient locations of very, very large blocks that fit incredibly precisely together without any kind of filler or mortar or cement or anything of that nature. So that, that in a nutshell tells you that somebody else was there previously and had advanced technology of some kind, either similar to or maybe even more advanced than what we have today.
Yeah, I mean, it looks really advanced and it looks impressive. But I mean, to a layman, it might not be that impressive. I mean, if you don't understand what you're looking for, I mean, a big stone structure from the 1500s, say, and a big stone structure from way back, thousands of years back, may look just about the same to a layman. So is the difference between, I mean, if you compare, for instance, a very magnificent, impressive building from later times, say the Colosseum in Rome or big cathedrals, medieval cathedrals, is it the size of the stone blocks that is the difference, or what's the main difference here?
Well, in a lot of cases, it's the size of the blocks, but also the precision of the fit and the fact that they utilize very hard stone in almost all cases, where something like a cathedral, as far as I know, tend to be made up of limestone, which is a very soft material. So limestone is something that you can fashion with very hardened bronze or iron or steel tools. But iron and steel were not something that the dynastic Egyptians nor the Inca had.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one thing you might ponder then. I mean, of course, you don't have the answer, but you might have guesses. I mean, why did they construct these large buildings in hard stone, big stone blocks? Wouldn't be, this is perhaps a bit chronocentric or whatever the word is, but it seems to be a little bit smarter to use something like cement and bricks and mortar, because that's more, I mean, easier to build buildings like that than doing it like this. Have you pondered this?
Yeah, it's a lot easier to do that. And of course, when the Spanish arrived in Peru, they brought with them the technology of how to create concrete. And so they utilized that heavily in their churches and other buildings because they were able to build things very rapidly. They simply recycled the Inca and older stone works that they found. So the Spanish colonial construction is very crude compared to the megalithic work, and also is very vulnerable to earthquakes. So in 1950, there was a major earthquake that hit the city of Cusco and destroyed a lot of the colonial Spanish construction, but didn't do anything to the megalithic works that were there. On
Oh,
top of which, the Spanish did a lot of construction.
like Machu Picchu, for instance, was never
Yeah, exactly.
affected. Okay. Yeah. I mean, would we even today, or first question would be perhaps, or next question would be perhaps, what do the mainstream scientists say about this when this is pointed out that, I mean, they didn't have the kind of tools that would be required to cut these granite stone blocks and build like that. So how do they explain that this was done anyway? For instance, when it comes to the Great Pyramid in Giza.
Well, they simply don't. They still insist that the work was done by the dynastic Egyptians or the Inca utilizing hardened bronze tools, but this has been proven over and over again to not be possible. I mean, there are a number of videos on YouTube that show somebody trying to cut a granite block with a hardened bronze saw of some kind using quartz sand, and it's incredibly inefficient. They're able to penetrate the stone by maybe a few millimeters or maybe maximum a centimeter in the course of an 8-hour day.
Oh,
And that's, so there's no way that was the technology utilized.
no, because how long would that take? I mean, to build how many blocks are there in the Great Pyramid? 2.3 million or something?
Yeah.
So that would take what, thousands of years to build a pyramid with
Probably.
that method?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay. So would we even be able to today build a structure like the Great Pyramid with the technology that is available to us today?
It is possible, but it would be incredibly time consuming and incredibly expensive. And there's no modern day reason to build such a structure anyway. Modern buildings actually are becoming less and less durable.
Yeah.
We've gone from the 19th century where a lot of work was done in stone. Now we use steel, aluminum, and glass more than anything else, and that makes the structure, would last possibly 50 years or something like that before it would start to show major wear and tear. So it is possible, but it's not practical.
Mm. Okay. So, I mean, if there were to be a cataclysm soon, this civilization wouldn't leave any traces like these ones did, probably.
Yes.
Afterwards.
Well, simply rubble would be left behind, and there have been videos that have been made about what would happen to, say, New York if it was abandoned, like destroyed and abandoned, and nature would very rapidly take over the location.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are your theories about who were there? Or here's a question also. I mean, about what actually, when this mainstream narrative was set in stone, so to speak, was there initially some kind of intellectual battle among scientists and archaeologists as to how all these structures were? When Western scientists began investigating, for instance, the Giza Plateau, which was in the 18th and 19th centuries, was there initially some kind of intellectual battle where one group, one camp, thought that they might have been older than the dynastic Egypt, and another camp was more conservative, so to speak, and that was the one that prevailed? Do you know about this?
Yeah, I think the only one that we can really look at would be Flinders Petrie, who was an English archaeologist, and he found he was examining such things as tube drill holes in very hard material like granite, and he was actually able to get some of the cores out of the tube drill holes, and they're in his museum at the University of London in England. And so he was examining those and starting to question how it would be possible for the dynastic Egyptians to be able to um, produce something like that, because again, it's a very hard type of stone, and if you only have bronze as a material, that can't be responsible. And then later studies have been done by Christopher Dunn, who is an American machinist, and he was able to figure out, he and others, that the feed rate, which is the penetration rate of the tool, the drill in this case, entering the stone, would be about 300 times more efficient than what we have today in terms of modern diamond embedded drills. So we're talking about technology beyond our present day capacity.
That's really impressive. And there are also, aside from the pyramids themselves, there are artifacts found in, for instance, in tunnels underneath Giza. These big stone boxes that you have been talking a lot about, for instance, and also vases that seem to have been. I mean, they're made from very hard stone, hard rock, and it's they seem to have been made by way of, with the help of lathes. Is that the word?
Actually, even more complex than that, because a number, like they found, it was in the area of the Step Pyramid at Saqqara that they found a cache, or a bunch of these, between 30,000 and 40,000 of them, underneath the Step Pyramid, as if they were being hidden away on purpose. And yeah, most of them are made of very hard stone. Some of them actually have protuberances coming out from the sides, and those would not be possible to create on a lathe, because of course you'd snap them off if you were turning them at high speed. So it's more likely that there would be something like what's called a CNC machine, which is a computer controlled cutting device that would go in and be able to, computer control to do that kind of precise work. We also see the tool marks left behind. And it's just the sheer volume of the number of them that were found that is so amazing. There are probably 50 on display in the Cairo Museum, but they found, as I said, between 30,000 and 40,000 of them.
So we would today just barely be able to make something similar. Is that right?
Yeah. It would be very, very advanced computer control technology to be able to do that.
Wow. And these stone boxes, they are like, I mean, the mainstream tells people there, I mean, the guides who are taking tourists there, they tell them that these are sarcophagi, and they were for burial to bury kings or rich people or whatever. But you don't really believe that.
No, they say they were made for burial places for Apis bulls, who were a sacred type of bull to the dynastic people. But still, they can't explain how the stone, some of these boxes are up to 100 tons. The lid and the box are always made out of the same piece of stone. So they don't even try to bother to explain how the stone was quarried, either in Aswan, which is in southern Egypt, or from the eastern desert, and then transported across the desert or up from the south to the Giza area, and then how they were put into these tunnels, how they were made so precisely, because they're almost hermetically sealed. They fit almost perfectly together. So they don't even bother to try to attempt to answer those questions, or they don't even question. They simply say, this is the way we believe it was done, and if you don't believe them, then you're instantly dismissed. But that's why I come from a multidisciplinary background. That's why I take geologists and engineers and people like that with me to see these in person.
Yeah.
And none of them believes for a second that this was done using dynastic Egyptian technology. It had to be much, much older and much more advanced.
It seems as if the mainstreams, the reasoning among the mainstream people is that it must have been the dynastic Egyptians, because it's impossible that it was something different. It's just it's a circle reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how they did it, but it must have been them, because there were none here before. Period.
Yeah, there's basically nobody there before.
Yeah.
According to their timeline.
Yeah.
But of course, there is evidence that that's not the case at all. The evidence that we look at is staring you in the face and telling you, this was not done by the culture that Egyptologists state had to have done it, because there was no sophisticated society, according to them, prior to that time.
And the dynastic Egyptians themselves, they never claimed that they built these things.
Well, it's highly unlikely. There's a lot of growing evidence that Khufu and Khafre, who were supposedly responsible for the construction of the two of the largest pyramids, that they were actually responsible for doing things such as repairing the Sphinx. There is no evidence that either of them created the Sphinx at all, but there is growing evidence that hieroglyphics state that they were responsible for doing repair work and digging the Sphinx out from the sand. There's absolutely no evidence at all that either of them were responsible for the construction of the Great Pyramids, because there are no hieroglyphics that describe the building of the Great Pyramids, which is quite bizarre, since it's one of the greatest technological
that would be the first thing
history
to document, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
We did this.
Yeah.
So yeah, fascinating. And it's been said that it's a grave, but there's no evidence that anybody was actually buried there. Is there?
No, because the so-called King's Chamber does have a box in it, which is human size, but there's no evidence that anybody was ever buried in that box. And again, the basic timeline is that Khufu built or had the Great Pyramid built in 20 to 25 years, but that would mean that every stone, you'd have to be able to cut, move, and set into place one of these multi-ton blocks every 2 minutes.
Every 2 minutes, one block weighing what, 50 tons?
Well, from 20 to 80 tons.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's, it's just obvious that that didn't happen. It didn't happen that way. Okay. Right. So going over to Peru, I think in Peru, these megalithic structures that you find there, they display other features that are even more fantastical when it comes to the technology that was used. You could see that in Egypt, as far as I understand your teachings, your videos, and your books here, that you can envisage that they used very advanced tools, instruments to construct these things. But in Peru, in some place, I think it's in Pumapunku, or that's Bolivia, I guess. Anyway, it looks like, in some places, it looks like as if the people who built these structures had a technology to kind of soften stone, make it softer during a period when they constructed it, and then it was hardened again naturally after this. In what way is, of course, very difficult to understand, but maybe using some kind of sound technology, frequency technology. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, in Egypt, we see definite evidence of machining because we see the machine marks. We see saw marks. We see drill holes, and not like a few. We see multiple examples in different locations of this repeating technology. In one case, at a site called Abu Sir that almost nobody goes to, there's evidence of a circular saw that was used to cut stone that was 8 meters in diameter and possibly 4 or 5 millimeters thick, which is impossible. But in Peru, the difference is we don't see much in the way of machine marks at all. And it looks like it was a very even more advanced technology that was used, not related to how Egypt was constructed. And it does look like whoever was able to do this was able to temporarily alter the state of matter, that they were able to make stone into almost like a marshmallow state. and then transported it into place, and then it would very rapidly reset, and that's probably why we find that there are these bulging marks in some of the ancient stone walls. They protrude outwards. So yeah, in many ways, Peru and also Pumapunku, which shows almost perfectly laser flat surfaces, no evidence of sand, tool marks or sanding marks or anything like that. That even more advanced civilizations were involved in Peru and Bolivia than in Egypt. Egypt, it's a sense of scale because you have massive things such as the Great Pyramid, but in Peru, it's more megalithic walls, which are up to maybe 8 meters, 7 to 8 meters high. But it's also, there are no straight lines in Peru. Everything fits together, like all the stones interlock, and there's no common pattern in terms of a 90-degree angle going into the stone. Quite often, it's different angles that go in. That would help to interlock it. But in that way, Peru and Bolivia are probably even more enigmatic than Egypt is.
Yeah, yeah. It really looks like, as you say, as those stones were transformed into some kind of marshmallows, and then congealed there in place. Maybe if you can send me some pictures, I might be able to insert in the video some photos of this, which would be great for the viewers, I think, on YouTube. Anyway, so this is, then you start wondering who were there, who was this, who were these people who built these structures in Egypt, Peru, also Easter Island. You'll be talking a lot about Easter Island. We have Stonehenge. We have other sites we might come back to. But do you have any theories about? There's a lot of talk, of course, about the very legendary, famous lost civilization of Atlantis, and there is one called Mu or Lemuria, and it's very hazy. I mean, the legends and stories are very hazy, and there are different accounts of as to during what period this might have happened. And of course, Plato is the one that the most famous accounter of the story about Atlantis. So, do you have any theories yourself about, let's say, Atlantis? If that was a civilization, and if so, was that the one that was responsible for these megalithic structures in, for instance, Egypt and maybe in other sites?
Well, unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any physical evidence for Atlantis, which is the biggest problem. You know, there are so many different theories about where Atlantis was and who the Atlanteans were. Of course, Plato's case is likely the oldest that's been recorded about that, based on his ancestor Solon's work and based on Solon visiting the Egyptians and the high Egyptian priests telling him about these ancient cataclysms that happened. So yeah, unfortunately, there's no real, as far as I can tell, concrete evidence for Atlantis. And Lemuria or Mu could very well have been, as far as I'm concerned, the Hawaiian Islands, because 13,000 years ago, when the sea level was 400 feet lower than it is today, almost all the Hawaiian Islands would have been connected to one another. So that would have been a relatively large landmass. And aside from that, you know, I haven't heard any logical ideas about other civilizations that could have existed. Of course, we don't have any of the that we know of. We don't have any of the bodies of anything that old on public display.
Yeah,
so that's, you know, of course, yeah.
There are some recent findings in Siberia, as you know, of course. The Denisovans, I believe they're called, the human group that's supposedly lived there, I think 30 to 40,000 years ago, and that has been dated, I mean, in the mainstream. They have found some very advanced metal work, jewelry and things like that, very advanced in those sites there. So where do they fit in your view?
Again, I guess Andrew Collins is the one who's written more about the Denisovans than anybody else. And as far as I know, they have found a bracelet that's made out of stone that dates back to that time. It looks like it was made using some kind of advanced technology. But as far as I can tell, they weren't technologically sophisticated people. So that's about as far as I've studied them.
Yeah.
And the same with the Neanderthal. Of course, the Neanderthal were supposedly, to some degree, as intelligent or more intelligent than us, but they didn't have any advanced technological skill, as far as I can tell. So that's the biggest problem, is that when people say who did it, it's like Atlantis. Atlantis, of course, is the obvious example that people would say. And I'm honestly open to the idea that it could have been extraterrestrials. I'm not close to the concept. I don't have any evidence for it, but I think if you simply say it had to have been done by humans, you're closing the door on a broad spectrum of possibilities.
Yeah. So that's the extraterrestrial thing is really fascinating, of course, and Michael Tellinger, of course, is known to be delving deeply into that. We have these beings that are called, now I forget the name. The Anunnaki, of course, the Anunnaki, which are told about in the Sumerian tablets, for instance, and there is this theory that they may have come from other planets or so at some point and interbred. But anyway, so there's also the Nazca Lines in Peru. Where do those fit in? What are they, and what do they show? How old are they, the Nazca Lines?
Okay, well, I'm actually located about a 3-hour drive from Nazca here on the coast. So they're just south of me, and there's a lot of evidence that they were created by two cultures. The first was the Paracas, who existed between about 800 BC and about 100 BC, or maybe even 100 AD. And then the Nazca civilization moved in from the north, and then they took over the construction of the lines and geoglyphs up until about 600 AD, when their civilization collapsed due to localized climate change. So they were created. This whole system was created between about 500 BC and 500 AD.
Okay, so that's not that old then.
No.
Okay. Looks cool though. I mean, from space, from the air, when you see these lines, it looks very mystical. The whole thing, mysterious.
Very.
What's your take on this new or relatively new finding in Indonesia, Gunung Padang? It's supposedly the largest pyramid in the world, but it doesn't look like an Egyptian pyramid. It looks slightly different.
Yeah, from what I've seen of the photographs and some videos, it appears to be a number of basalt, almost like logs that are stacked on top of one another. So again, it doesn't look like it's sophisticated in terms of how it was constructed, but it does look like it's quite massive and is quite ancient. Had to have been done by a very coordinated society of some kind. But as far as I can tell, it was a local basalt material that was used to construct that. So the mystery is in its age and who made it, not so much how it was made, because it doesn't look.
But because the dating has been established to be, it's established that it's probably 20,000 years old or something like that.
Yeah, I think at least 12.
At least 12. Okay, yeah. So that's interesting in and of itself, even though the structure might not be that impressive. So, Okay, so now you have been touching on the what happened 12,000 years ago. You just said that figure. So let's segue over to the cataclysm then. So the reason why these ancient civilizations, apparently very advanced, disappeared. So what happened, and how can we know what happened?
Well, there's growing evidence that there were a series of cataclysms that happened on the Earth between roughly 13,000 and 12,000 years ago. Some say it was solar plasma outbursts from the sun that caused the very rapid melting of the northern ice cap, causing the raising of sea level by 400 feet or 100 and something meters in the course of 1,000 years. Other people speculate that it was a pulse from the center of our galaxy, of lethal energy that was emitted from the black hole in the center of our galaxy. And
what about
the
meteors?
comet,
An asteroid?
yeah, yeah, and or meteors or an asteroid. They've recently found in Greenland an asteroid evidence that was approximately a mile in diameter and had the force of 57 or so million Hiroshima bombs hitting. That itself could have caused the rapid end of the ice age as well. So there are all these theories. The commonality is that all the theories are giving the same timeline of between 12 and 13,000 years that this happened. So again, you have Dr. Robert Schoch's theory. You have physicist Paul Laviolette's theory. So that's the commonality, that they all agree that it was at the end of what's called the Younger Dryas time period that all of this happened. It wasn't, like in a movie, a one-day event or something like that. It was probably a series of events that happened. Others speculate that the reason why astronomy began was because these devastating things came from the sky, and so from that time on, there was constant monitoring of the heavens to see if this was going to come back, and that's shown in many different cultures, including the Chinese, with the great dragons from the sky sort of thing.
Yeah, Andrew Collins is writing and speaking a lot about this. And is this also what is behind all these legends and myths about giant floods? Like the story of Noah in the Bible and many others all over the world.
Yeah, exactly. There are at least 200 cultures around the world that talk about the destruction of their world by a flood of some kind or a series of floods. The one, of course, we know most easily is the one referred to in the Bible. The problem is that none of them give a proper timeline. It's always a statement of long ago this happened.
Yeah.
But until it can be quantified, the great thing is that many different cultures have talked about this. The concept of their world, whether it was an island or whether it was a continent, went through destruction due to a massive flood or series of floods.
Yeah, well, that's compelling in itself that there are so many different cultures talking about this. And so if the sea rose, and we kind of know that, don't we? That the sea rose by 100 meters, maybe more, during a short period of time, then that it would make sense then to look for more megalithic structures and remains from ancient civilizations on the shelves, the sea shelves around the continents, wouldn't it?
Exactly, and also in the Mediterranean probably as well.
Yeah. Is
and
that
the
being
Black
done?
Sea. No, not as far as I know. I remember Graham Hancock. He wrote
a book
called
about that.
Called Underworld.
Yes.
And so he wanted to dive in the Mediterranean. He wanted to dive off southern India, and he was blocked by the governments of those areas from doing that. Obviously, they had something to hide. They didn't want certain evidence to show up. And even during the great tsunami that happened in Southeast Asia, whenever that was, 11 or so years ago, supposedly there were fishermen that were out fishing, and when the tsunami was picking up its power as the tide receded, supposedly buildings started to appear.
Oh, really?
In the shallow water, yeah. And then when the tsunami hit, they were resubmerged. So there's probably a lot of evidence in the Mediterranean and also areas of southern India, and possibly as well in the shallow waters of places like Hawaii, that there are ancient structures that do exist that simply are not being allowed to be observed or written or filmed about.
That's really fascinating. I would really love that to be examined. My God. Didn't Graham Hancock manage to do some diving outside of Bahamas, where he actually found structures that looked like they had some kind of pyramid shape?
Well, a number of different different authors and filmmakers have filmed around what's called Bimini in the Bahamas area,
Yeah.
showing possible evidence of ancient roads and things like that. Um, I remember as a child watching that on TV. So that's when my initial fascination started with all, mysterious structures,
Yeah,
mysterious
yeah.
things underwater. But I don't think there's a lot of really super good evidence that they're not necessarily natural. They could be man-made, they could be natural,
Okay.
but you would be looking at areas under 100 meters presently underwater for any ancient structures from that time frame.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully it'll be done someday. So megalithic structures is one extremely, of course, important piece of evidence in the investigation that you and others are doing about our history. But another one that you have been studying for a long time is these mysterious ancient skulls. So tell us about the elongated skulls that have been found in Paracas, Peru, and elsewhere also.
Okay, well, yeah, I saw my first actually physical elongated skull in a small museum, which is presently closed in the little town of Paracas. It's a mummified elongated skull, and I come from a biological pre-med background. So when I saw this, I was quite astonished because it seemed to be beyond the capacity of being able to be shaped artificially, as in cradle headboarding or any kind of technique like that. It appeared to me to be a natural form, and over the course of time, we've been able to study hundreds of these elongated skulls. About 5% of them, which are the oldest ones, appear to be natural in shape, whereas all the other ones appear to be cranial deformation or head binding. So the oldest ones are the ones that appear to be natural in shape, and the later ones are simply these ancient people or beings breeding with normal people.
Okay, and we know this
And
because of DNA analysis that the natural ones are older.
yeah, well, yeah, from carbon, radiocarbon dating, and also from DNA analysis as well.
So what's the difference between, I mean, because that's what the mainstream scientists are saying, of course, about this, is that it's all about cranial deformation. It's a cultural thing, but there is a difference, isn't there? I mean, a big difference between these that appear natural and the ones that are obviously deformated. What are the differences?
Well, one difference is the cranial volume in the oldest ones appears on average to be about 25% larger than normal. So that's not something you can do by changing the shape of it. Also, there's a suture line that we have called the sagittal suture coming across this way that does not exist in the oldest skulls. Also, the eye sockets are larger. The foramen magnum, which is where your spinal column enters your skull, is 2.5 centimeters back from where it should be. Those
Because
are
because
also
of the need to balance this larger head.
exactly the skull. Exactly, yeah. That's the logical answer. And of course, I've had a lot of medical doctors come to look at these skulls mainly from the United States, but also from Europe, and none of them have been able to explain these differences based on their education. They simply say, I don't know what it is I'm looking at.
Yeah.
We've also found two fetuses that in two small museums in Peru and Bolivia where the body where the head is the size of the torso.
Wow.
So,
That's anomalous, to say the
oh, it
least.
is.
Yeah. And then there was recently DNA analysis made as to where these skulls may originate from, which was very interesting. So what
Yeah, that's
the
true.
results from that analysis?
Well, we've studied 20 of the skulls so far, and only two of the 20 would indicate Native American maternal lineage. So that, of course, all of the academics say that these ancient elongated headed people living in Peru were Native Americans, but they've never done DNA analysis. So, they have nothing to back that up. But two of the 20 were the maternal DNA was Native American. Two of them, uh, the the result simply was unknown. Like the computer couldn't, when it did a comparison with all known human DNA, it couldn't find a match anywhere. And then the other ones all are related to other elongated skulls that have been found around the area of the Black Sea and Caspian Sea.
The Black
So
Sea and
that would
Caspian Sea?
indicate,
Okay.
yeah, so
Other side of the
would
world.
indicate, right, that would indicate migration, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, this upends, of course, the narrative about how America was populated.
Exactly.
So what's your theory about how that actually happened? I mean, the standard theory is that everybody came from over the Bering Strait from Asia into America about 13,000, 14,000 years ago or something like that. And before that, there was nobody. But this tells a different story. What's your theory?
Well, I think one possibility is that they migrated from the Black Sea and Caspian Sea area to the coast of Peru due to being invaded by non-sympathetic people of some kind. Because the problem is that in Paracas, they only existed, as far as we can tell, still from between about 800 BC to maybe 100 AD maximum. And that's no timeline for there to be able to be any kind of genetic change, of any kind. The ones in the Black Sea and Caspian Sea area that I've seen from photographs are a little bit older or contemporary. So that's why this is another very enigmatic problem.
Yeah.
Is they don't seem to have evolved from something else. They suddenly appear and then they disappear. And that's the great enigma.
Okay, so then you start thinking maybe they came from somewhere else. I mean, going back to the ET.
Yeah. Well, there is that possibility. There is that possibility. Also, recently, which I didn't know, Nassim Harriman and his team were able to do analysis of the paternal, which is the nuclear DNA, which is the father's DNA,
Yeah.
and of two skulls, which are the last two that we studied, and they were not able to find any match with anything in the genetic banks regarding Homo sapiens sapiens.
I know. Yeah, I heard that. I heard him say this, and it's. I mean, I'm flabbergasted because I think he said something like the match with ordinary Homo sapiens DNA was 3 to 4% or something like that. The rate of matching, and Homo sapiens DNA, the Homo sapiens totality of DNA matches with a banana to a degree of about 40%. So this means that these creatures, these beings, were less related to Homo sapiens than a banana is,
which is quite bizarre. Yeah,
quite bizarre.
Quite bizarre. Yeah.
So where did they come from? That's the big.
That's the ongoing question.
Yeah. Do you think you will find the answer before you leave this world?
I hope so. I haven't given up on it. I'm still studying all of this stuff. So I'm hoping we're going to get more information. We can continue to do DNA testing from skulls and other material from private collections. So there still is openings to continue studying this.
So what do mainstream academics and scholars say about the elongated skulls in the Caspian Sea and Black Sea area? Do they have the same story there, that this is just deformation of craniums?
Well, you either have that, or you have articles written about that the ones there are, you either get that, which is one extreme view, and the other extreme view is they simply are aliens or alien human hybrids.
Okay.
not necessarily written by academics, but
No.
there's there's still very little. I've been able to find very little information about the Black Sea, Caspian Sea ones. I do know of locations of ancient cemeteries where a few have been found. I don't know where they're stored. The opportunity of going on location is very difficult, of course, at this point. But I do have there are a number of Russian researchers that I've been in contact with who are going to try to look for more information for me about that.
Okay. Speaking of going to the actual location, are you sometimes being counteracted by authorities when you're in the field doing your research? Are they
Yeah, I
opposing
would say
you?
more and more just more and more limitations. The majority of the elongated skulls that we studied were from the Ica Regional Museum here in Peru, and it was all coordinated by their senior archaeologist. So he allowed the DNA to be tested, but then when I sent him the results, he didn't respond to emails at all
Hmm.
because they didn't match what he want. You know, he wanted all the results to say Native American people, but because of that, I actually went to his office unannounced and confronted him with it, and he didn't want to talk about the matter.
Hmm. So what about when you're in Egypt and study these structures? Are you stopped sometimes by the authorities?
Actually, Egypt's completely different. Egypt's actually opening up more.
Is it?
Um, yeah, more and more locations. I go once a year, and each year that I go, there's always somewhere that I get to look and film and study that I haven't been allowed to in the past.
Oh,
So
that's good.
uh, yeah, so under the step pyramid, we know there's a series of tunnels that go on for at least 6 miles in the bedrock. So that's slowly opening up to access. Uh, Now we know that the Serapeum, which is where the giant boxes are located, that they've actually found or they've disclosed that there's another room that has more of them, and that that's starting to open up more. So Egypt, compared to other locations, um, especially Peru and Bolivia, are much more um, opening up to investigation, which is good because
Yeah.
the other countries are becoming very it's becoming very frustrating in other countries. But Egypt, at least, is the one that has a good future to be able to unravel more of its history. We also know that the Sphinx is hollow because I was able to film um, that fact when I was there in October with a camera. Um, so the tunnel systems are what really fascinate me about Egypt. And as time goes on, we'll get more and more access to locations that previously were off limits.
Hmm. There's a whole world under there. And why would they build
Yeah.
these long tunnels and these enormous stone boxes that are 3 times bigger than a human being to bury people? I mean, it must have been something else. And you have theories about that, don't you? I mean, that it wasn't kind of an energy, uh, energy system or something.
That's what we're theorizing, that it's possible that the Great Pyramids were actually energy transmitters, and then that the obelisks, which are of course one piece of solid granite, that they were receivers. So it's like a wireless system in the very, very ancient past that could have existed.
Yeah.
Um, and the reason for all the tunnels, that even some of the Egyptologists admit that there are tunnel systems. Zahi Hawass, who used to be the head of the antiquities department, stated that there's one at Saqqara that goes on for a mile, at least a mile and a half.
Yeah.
Now we learned that it's at least 6 miles of tunnels. It could be much, much bigger than that. So it's all of this secret underground stuff that's slowly being opened up, which is wonderful.
Yeah, incredible. And I've heard you saying that even some of the guides are referring to your videos sometimes when they are telling about these things to tourists.
Yeah, that seems to be as more as time goes on. I'm very honored by that fact that some of the younger ones are waking up and watching videos that deviate from the standard story, and they're actually starting to educate the public about these ideas.
Yeah. Has the mainstream science, would you say, moved in any way in your direction, so to speak? Either when it comes to possible lost civilizations, a possible cataclysm that wiped out things, or a possible non-Homo sapiens humanoid species parallel to us.
Well, with the ancient cataclysm, there's increasing study by academics of the fact that these events did exist. So that's promising. In terms of the megalithic work, that most are still insisting that it was all done by, as we started the conversation about either the dynastic Egyptians or the Inca, though they have no evidence for it. But the general public are waking up, which is what's important.
Yeah, and it's easier now to spread the information.
And with the elongated skulls, it's an ongoing process. So I'm sure I'll be doing future DNA studies, probably with Nassim, because he's the one who financed the latest DNA studies. He said there's an unlimited budget. We're going to find out what's going on. But the two we studied, even though we did take 60 or 70 samples, that's not enough information yet to make it solid. So I'm hoping that we're going to continue to do this as time goes on, and study more of the elongated skulls.
Yeah. Okay. When it comes to the megalithics thing and the lost civilizations, I was under the impression some time ago that the discovery of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and the fact that the dating is quite irrefutable. I mean, everybody accepts that it's at least 10,000 years old or so. That would change the narrative. That would help be kind of a catalyst to change the narrative a bit. Do you see that happening? That Göbekli Tepe might be the finding that finally gets these mainstream archaeologists and scientists to maybe shift their view a little bit?
Well, I think they're going to have no choice but to start to accept it, because the radiocarbon dating that has been done at Göbekli Tepe proves that it's at least 11,000 years old. That's twice as old as any known civilization. It had to have been done by a coordinated society and not by a bunch of hunter-gatherers, which is literally what the museum on site says. It says a number of hunter-gatherers came and seasonally would move these 10 to 20 ton, limestone blocks into place. But it was obviously done by a very sophisticated, coordinated society, and possibly was buried on purpose. They've only excavated, I think, 3% of Göbekli Tepe so far. It's much, much bigger than what it is when you go there. But for some reason, the Turkish government is not eager to do much more in terms of digging. I don't know why, because if the evidence is that it's at least 11,000 years old, then why not just continue? But Göbekli Tepe is quite crude in terms of its construction, so that doesn't help us with the more megalithic sites where you see precise engineering and technology at work.
No, aside the fact that the blocks are very heavy, of course. But they're not as big, perhaps, as the ones that build the pyramid in Giza.
No,
not nearly. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? If you should guess here now, in 10 years from now, how does our story? How does the story about our ancient origin look?
I think there'll be a lot more eyes looking at this, because I'm very thankful in that I've been able to inspire other people to go on location and film the same things. You have one channel called Uncharted X by Ben, who's an Australian engineer. So he's become very popular. There's also an even younger guy called Jimmy of a station called or channel called Bright Insight. He was on Joe Rogan 2 days ago.
Okay.
Which is quite profound. He's got 1.2 million subscribers.
Yeah.
There's a young lady from England called Johanna James. She went to Egypt with Ben about a year ago, so she's got a very good channel. There's another lady from Holland called Kaylee. has got a channel called History with Kaylee. So I think they'll probably be, those are the ones I can name off the top of my head that are quite relatively recent.
Yeah.
So I think in 10 years, there'll probably be 100 times as many YouTube channels looking at this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
which I'm very happy about. So it won't just be me, the older generation like Graham Hancock and people. I don't think they're doing too much anymore. So I'm very happy that there are a number of younger people that are taking this on in quite a serious manner, and they're reaching millions of people with what they're showing.
Mm.
And we're also working together. Jimmy and Ben von Charted X were with me in Peru in August. So we're going to be doing other tours and trips together in the future, probably going to Egypt again, maybe to locations in Southeast Asia, possibly Turkey and other locations. So yeah, the future looks very bright for this.
That's great. But it's also going to be a crisis for the education system, don't you think? The whole, scholarship around these things that we've had for decades and decades.
Well, I think as these older academics retire, some of the younger generations are more open-minded to this, and they're being influenced not only by their professors, but also by what they see on YouTube. And even better, if they go in person and see, if you see this stuff in person, it's much more impressive than watching somebody's YouTube video about it. And that's how you can more easily convince people that, what they're looking at is not what they were taught, but it's something much more intriguing.
But you need to know what to look for, I think. So that's why it's so helpful with these videos and books that you and others are
True.
Conveying. But that's what I mean. The people are thinking for themselves much more, I think, and are not taking for granted what professors and teachers are telling them, which they may have done to a larger extent 50 years ago, but that's not the case now. And that's why it's a bit messy in the world, I think, because people are also not listening to their politicians and they're not listening to their teachers. So I think it's creating a very messy world, but also very interesting where things are happening and shifting. And some of the shifts are probably needed, probably needed. So we're in for a ride.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So, Brien, where can people find your work if they want to know more?
I guess my website, which is hiddenincatours.com. That's where the bulk of my work is. Connections to the books, connections to my YouTube channel, and lots of articles and interviews and things like that are located there. So that's like my main center for all of the information relating to me and what I've done and what I plan to do in the future.
Okay, Brien Foerster, thank you so much for taking your time to be a guest on Mind the Shift, and keep up the good work that you're doing out there.
Okay, thank you, Anders. Pleasure.
If you like this video and other interviews and talks on Mind the Shift, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. Thank you.